Are there green lines coming up around the microphone thing as I talk? No, on the computer. Do you see things moving as I talk? Okay. I'm also the videographer. Nice to meet you guys. Okay, no, you're fine, you're fine.
I think it just got hidden behind you.
Yeah, we're good, we're good. Coming back.
I get to watch this. Oh no, but I'm
Hey guys. Ooh. Spicy, a little bit loud.
Oh my gosh, I'm in the camera.
Sorry guys, I'm working multiple jobs tonight. Ooh. Okay, on the bright side, the Facebook stream has volume. Hi. All right, if you guys have any problems with the live stream tonight, we can't fix them, and I'm sorry. Okay, hi, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. I'm so excited to be here. If this is your first time, give us a little wave. Oh, first timers, welcome. And if you know me personally, please give a little wave. Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, it's a full house tonight. Thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Patti Swanson. I'm the founder and executive director of Chicago for Chicagoans. I started this project 7 years ago because I thought that there was a hole in the market. I felt like there weren't enough opportunities for Chicagoans to learn more about the history of their own city. I felt like there weren't enough tours of Chicago neighborhoods. I felt very critically that there weren't enough low-cost tours of Chicago. Many tours in the city cost at least $15 all the way up to $40 and $50, which is cost prohibitive for a lot of people who might want to learn more about the history of our city. And I also felt like there was this huge miss. I was a professional tour guide then, I still am. And I felt 7 years ago like I spent so much time explaining Chicago history to tourists, and they cared at such a surface level. And so I would spend my time reading newspaper archives about random bullshit and then have no one to share that with. So Chicago for Chicagoans was born because of all of those things, a lot of different layers as to why we exist here today. But then and now, it is a passion project. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are entirely run by volunteers. I have been volunteering my time to respond to your emails for many, many years. But I'm not alone anymore, which is great. That's why we use the royal we when we talk about ourselves on the internet. We have a very involved board of directors. Shout out to Layla, who's here tonight. Past and present, the people who have served on our board of directors have been very involved in our organization and have given a lot of their time. We have a new part-time staff member, Anthony, who's also a lecturer for us. And of course, we have some really incredible routine volunteers. Give it up for Olivia and Stephanie. Not only do they help out with our lecture series every single week for 4 months of their life, they also help out all summer on walking tours. So this is a passion project of a lot of different people, and we all do it because we love Chicago history, and we believe that people should be able to learn about it no matter what their financial income may be. But selfishly, it's also really fucking exciting if you're a Chicago historian to be able to talk to a group of fucking nerds who live here, because you guys already know when the fire was and you want to know who died exactly. So it's a really good time. So with that being said, I also would like to tell you guys that it is my birthday. I'm gonna fuck my mic up. Okay. Okay, don't do the whole thing. I got a lot of shit to say. Happy birthday, dear Patty. Thank you. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. There is nowhere else I would rather spend my 30th birthday And yes, I know I am so young, but I felt 30 for a really long time. I'm the youngest, so I've been trying to catch up to people 5, 6, and 7 years older than me my whole life. At any rate, the reason I put this sash on is because we're a 501c3 nonprofit and I'm trying to guilt you into donating. Because as I mentioned, we are an all-volunteer organization. We do have to pay the IRS and accountants and insurance and all kinds of things. So there are real hard costs to our organization. We also offer payment to all of our speakers because even though we couldn't possibly afford to pay them for every single hour they spent reading newspaper archives, we want to offer them something to tell them that we love them. So there are hard costs to this organization. If you have the financial means to do so, and only if you have the financial means to do so, we ask you make a donation and I will guilt trip you. It's my birthday. This is my passion project. Please. Oh, I gotta move the sash for the mic. Okay, sorry. Anyway, all right. So we are here today, now that I've got all the business out of the way, to talk about farming and agriculture. And when I told my partner, our videographer for this series, not this guy, he's a temp. When I told him what I was talking about for the lecture series this year, he goes, "Oh, that's the one I was looking forward to the least." Which I thought was hilarious, and it's the reason I'm dating somebody who doesn't have a natural interest in Chicago history, because if I dated somebody who did have a natural interest in Chicago history, I would lose sight of what's interesting to people. So I'm going to start my lecture tonight by telling you guys why you should care about the history of agriculture in Illinois, and very specifically Chicago. And that is because in these 7 years I have spent researching Chicago neighborhoods somewhat obsessively, as well as attending a lot of incredible neighborhood walking tours researched by other talented people affiliated with our organization. Every neighborhood story very early in it talks about farms. Those farms either give the name to the neighborhood, like Budlong Woods, or we're going to talk about Budlong today, or they give street names, right? So Bill, when he was here, Bill Savage, at our first lecture of the season, he talked a lot about Crawford. Crawford was a farmer on the southeast side. And now, although his street is named Pulaski today, there's many other farmers who actually got to keep the names of their streets, Harding being another one we're going to talk about today. So farms always influence the story of every Chicago neighborhood, and you probably don't even realize how much farming is secretly embedded in the city around you. The other reason farms are really cool, and the reason I first became interested in kind of more broadly rural Chicago, pre-industrialization, is because every so often in the course of my research, I stumble upon a picture like the first one in your handout or on the slides. I got a little slide happy, you guys. So there's a QR code. Just scan the QR code because I just can't kill too many trees. All of our speakers, myself included, want 75 slides, so I can print a limited number of packets. Anyway. I can give you 0. Yeah. We like reference images, but we're online, we're in person, we got a lot of stuff. So use the QR code and then you can zoom into the pictures too. Okay. I'll give you a second to pull up the slides, but the first 2 images that you'll see here today, here, Nick, I'll take that and I'll just hold it up. Okay, all right, that's fine, great. So the first 2 images that you'll see are images that broke my brain when I first saw them. And that's because they represent landmarks in my own neighborhood that I have looked at a million times, and I fully cannot comprehend the fact that there is jack shit around them. You have Kimball Station when it opened in 1909. I live in Albany Park, so Kimball Station is my train station. And when I look at that picture, my brain just cracks in half. When Kimball Station opened in 1909, you could see both Western Avenue and the river from Kimball. I assure you, you can no longer see either of those things from Kimball. Another good image there, the old Lawrence Avenue Bridge, and kudos to whoever, little librarian, wrote this caption. It had no approaches and was quite useless. Hilarious. But the thing that you'll you'll notice in that picture is not just that the bridge isn't the same, but that literally the river doesn't look like that anymore. There's nothing about that image that's recognizable except for the fact that you know where it is. And when I see pictures like that, it breaks my brain, because the reality is Chicago went from a farming town in 1830, literally just the frontier of America, to like movie palaces 100 years later. That transition happened so quickly and at a period of time where we had photographs. So we have so many images of Chicago before Chicago was a thing. And that to me is fascinating, because I cannot fully conceptualize what it was like to live in Chicago when I had to trek through a swamp to the not L, you know? So that's kind of what first made me interested in early Chicago in the first place. It would be awesome if you turned off your cell phone noise. Thanks. Anyway, and it happened within lifetimes. I mean, I'm going to tell you guys today some stories of people who literally saw this change happen with their own two eyes, which is pretty crazy. The last reason agriculture is important and why you should care is it's the reason we have the Chicago hot dog. I'm wearing these hot dog earrings. Shout out to my friend Emily. They're not Chicago dogs, but I guess I don't make those. But agriculture is what connects Chicago to the rest of Illinois. It connects to the rest of Illinois historically, culturally, economically. It's the reason we have a city here at all. You cannot have Illinois without Chicago. I think we can all agree. And you cannot, most importantly, have Chicago without Illinois. And so, you know, all the time downstaters are like, we're going to be our own state or whatever. But it's really easy when you live in the largest metropolis of the state of Illinois to forget and to take for granted how much agriculture brings to your daily life. It is not an accident that we are considered one of, if not the best food city in the United States. And that is because we are in America's breadbasket, baby. We have so much fucking produce coming in all the time, and we're going to talk about why that produce comes here and why we're able to be a food city. Why every hipster restaurant you go to lists the name of the farm that produced the cheese that went on your food. That's not something everybody has. People in other parts of the country don't have that. We're really unique in that way, and we owe a lot to agriculture. So shout out to the rest of Illinois. Okay. Thank you. So that's why you should care. Great. Now I want to start this lecture by talking a little bit about rural Chicago. And when I say rural Chicago, I'm really meaning pre-European, before all the white folks showed up and fucked everything up, but also built Chicago. And I'm going to start with a quote by David Standish. He wrote a really interesting article in the history of Lakeview that I sampled from heavily for this lecture. Only 160 years after Marquette had first seen this wilderness, the last of its original inhabitants were gone, dead, or 86th. First of all, he says 86, and that's like what you say in a restaurant when you run out of like pie. Kind of crude, but to the point. It really summarizes it in a neat way. But ultimately, indigenous people were drawn to Chicago for the same reason Europeans were drawn to Chicago. We're really lucky. We basically have 3 different biomes in Chicago that are just native to our landscape. We have wet, sandy swamp. You're all familiar with this after it rains, especially if you live in Albany Park. What up? Very wet. So we have wet, sandy swamp. We have grassland. We have the prairie. That's a significant part of Chicago's biomes as well. And then actually wooded highlands. So the high ground in Chicago historically usually had large stands of trees and was functionally woods. You don't see this so much anymore in Chicago unless you're in a cemetery, but and most of the cemetery trees were planted. But a good example is Bohemian National Cemetery, if you ever get a chance to go up there. A lot of those oaks are original, and that kind of gives you a sense of what Chicago was like when it was woods, prairie, and swamp, right? So these are our 3 things. Now, woods, prairie, and swamp are awesome if you are living off the land. Indigenous people here use the Chicago River as a food source. You could fish. You could also navigate around very easily in your canoe. You could hunt in the woods. You could gather berries in the grassland. I mean, we are like a fucking magical place to have berries, you guys. There's so many native berries to Illinois. Berries, grasses. You could farm on the floodplains of the Chicago River. Floodplains are an incredible place to grow agriculture. Even the ancient Egyptians figured that out. So there was a lot of opportunity here to live off the land, and still today we really live off the land. I mean, there's shitloads of gardens and everything all over the place. And this was a major trade center as well because of the transportation network of the Chicago River and its connection through the Chicago portage to the Mississippi River system, as well as its connection to the Great Lakes. This was a major trade center for over 13 different indigenous tribes, including the Potawatomi, the Miami, Illinois. There were over 10,000 people living here at the time of Europeans first showing up, which is kind of crazy, really. Also, you'll see in the slides a list of different tribal locations in 1760 to give you a better sense of the different people that were here before we wiped them all out with smallpox. Technically, it wasn't my people that wiped them out. I'm German. We came later, but... Looking at you, people who brag about being connected to the Mayflower.
Anybody more annoying?
All right. And when I joke, it's not because I'm making light of actually horrible, horrible history. I have to make jokes every once in a while or you'll all leave here super fucking depressed. And that's not my intent. Okay. Thank you. It's useless at this time, but I'll take it. So the next group that we have in here are fur traders, predominantly. The first white people, mostly either they were trying to convert indigenous people to Christianity, big surprise, or looking at you, Marquette, or they are fur traders looking to trade with indigenous people because indigenous people understood the land and were way better at catching all the creatures that lived on it. So 1600s, 1700s, that's when you have most of those white, mostly French people coming into this area. They discovered very quickly that indigenous tribes were not super willing to just trade with a random stranger. So the way that they got around this, the French married a lot of indigenous women and then abandoned them and all their children. But they married into these families. So surprisingly, Chicago in its early European history is more diverse than many parts of Chicago are today. It's kind of crazy. You have Jean-Baptiste Pontoussaint. You might know him from Lakeshore Drive. He comes here in the 1780s. He is African from Haiti, and he marries a Potawatomi woman, has a bunch of kids. And then you have Antoine Wilmette. You might know him from The Suburb. He was a mixed-race French-Canadian who got here in 1790, also marries a Potawatomi woman. So fairly diverse group of people here in the late 1700s. Ultimately, if you were a woman or a mixed-race person or a black person or a brown person or whatever, Eastern society wasn't where you wanted to really hang out at this period in time because they had all the snobbery and the racism of industrialized nations in Europe. The frontier was where it was at because if you were a single woman, you could run a whole ass farm yourself on the frontier and nobody would bat an eye. Or if you were a mixed race family, it was easier to survive on the prairie, even though living itself was harder. At least people weren't being racist assholes to you because there literally were no people around. Again, going back to Kimball Station in 1909, who's gonna fuck with you, man? There's nothing out there. I also want to name drop Guillery from Mackinac. You might know him from the island. A French trader. I find it interesting. I couldn't find any specific stories of indigenous farmers living here at the time. I welcome them if you know them. Guillery from Mackinac is the first recorded farmer that I could find in this area. Specific guy, anyway. He built a house and trading post around 1778 above what is now Fulton Street, and I will quote Libby Hill from the incredibly excellent book, Chicago River, A Natural and Unnatural History. Oh my God, it's so good, you guys. So many of her diagrams are in these. Anyway, he is said to have surrounded both of his buildings with a picket fence in order to protect his livestock, chickens, ducks, hogs, sheep, and cattle, from marauding wolves, parentheses, probably coyotes, bobcats, and the occasional bear. He lived there for 14 years. Soon after the French come the English and the Scottish. The English and Scottish are looking to kind of make use of those existing trade relationships. They bring a lot of industrialized goods from Europe. We're talking guns, awls, axes, knives, kettle, glass beads, liquor, and they trade those things for fur. Now, this has a consequence. We talk all the time about smallpox blankets eradicating indigenous people, but the other thing that eradicated indigenous people were guns. Not all indigenous people here in the United States got along. It turns out people people, no matter who they are, ultimately hate other people that are slightly different from them, right? That's the story of America and everywhere else. So unfortunately, guns made tribal conflict more lethal. So that was another major cause of death. So all of those guns that the British were bringing in, dude, the British are always the enemy. I find this so funny. Like, I think all of everywhere can agree that the British were usually the enemy. I'll drink to that. Okay. America. All right. And then we have the Americans. So Fort Dearborn is established in 1803. Does anybody know what large land acquisition took place in 1803? Oh my God, you guys attended elementary school, the Louisiana Purchase. People looking around like, oh shit. Louisiana Purchase. So Fort Dearborn is put here. They say Fort Dearborn was built here to protect trading posts and make sure that people weren't getting ripped off. Fort Dearborn, in my opinion, was probably also put there to sort of guard this massive investment that the United States had just made. The Louisiana Purchase encompassed all of the land draining into the Mississippi River. These fucking assholes didn't even know what drained into the Mississippi River at this point. That was like, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, like all of like Lewis and Clark's whole deal. Anyway, they didn't even know what they just bought. Sight unseen, purchased a home. Anyway, long story short, Fort Dearborn sat at the mouth of the Chicago River. Again, the Chicago River, through a swampy bit of prairie, connects to the Mississippi River system, so very advantageous point to put a fort. But the main reason people started immigrating en masse to Chicago from the East Coast and beyond was one of my favorite things to talk about, the Erie Canal. I would like to raise a toast to the Erie Canal, because without it, we wouldn't be here. Here, canals. Okay, why? Okay, so imagine you're like a little person who lives east of the Appalachian Mountains in 1820. Shit fucking sucks for you if you want to go west. You have the Appalachian Mountains to contend with. You have a shitty wagon with wooden wheels, no shock absorbers, no comforting padded seats. You have a fucking wooded bench on wooden wheels going across rocky-ass mountains that are not fucking roads. Shit sucks for you. If you want to go west, you're like, no, I'll stay east. The Erie Canal revolutionizes this, because the Erie Canal, I do have on one of these slides, wow, I put so many slides in here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't have to keep up with the slides. Do appreciate my word art for Conrad Sulzer. Anyway, I just get really slap happy with slides. Sorry, guys. All right, so there's this great map. Rates of travel 1800, rates of travel 1830. It took you 6 weeks to get to Chicago in 1800. By 1830, it cut that in half. 3 weeks. 3 weeks, all of a sudden, because the Erie Canal cut through a river valley, functionally, more or less, in upstate New York, and all of a sudden, instead of taking your bumpy-ass wagon with your wooden-ass seats and your wooden-ass wheels, you could get into a comfy-ass canal boat and have a mule pull you across silky smooth water. Don't you want to immigrate west if that's your option? Hell yeah, motherfuckers. Hell yeah. Let's go west. And that is what people did. So there was a huge land boom here in the 1830s. People already felt the East Coast was too overcrowded, so this was like really opportune at the time. Unfortunately, all that settlement means all of the like fur trading disappears, because you can't trap fur very effectively if you have like a bunch of people running around starting farms and shit. Okay. Also 1833, the United States government does this fucked up thing where they say, hey, if you were living here previously, now you can go west of the Mississippi River, get wrecked. So the U.S. government also, after the Black Hawk War, 1833, forces all indigenous people west of the Mississippi River. So you're no longer allowed to live here. We are no longer like culturally mixed, amazing little frontier town where no one gives a fuck. All of a sudden it's like, oh no, you're brown, get the fuck out. It's really fucked up. Okay. So Chicago has a sort of interesting, again, geography to it. I'm going to keep coming back to geography, because geography and way soil is affects farming, right? The prairie mostly to the west of the river, mostly. There are some exceptions, but the prairie was to the west. And to the east, you sort of have a natural fire break in the form of the Chicago River. So fires, usually at that point in time, lightning strikes, whatever, indigenous people actually burned a lot of prairie to make agriculture easier. They would, so you'd have these fires rage across the prairie. They'd hit the Chicago River and fizzle out. And so east of the river was mostly woods. Again, some exceptions, but a lot of woods to the east of the river because, the oak trees wouldn't burn down. You actually had this kind of protected land. So the east, from the earliest point in Chicago history, you had all these big oak trees and these birches and all these lovely trees. So if you're trying to build a fancy residence, why don't you want to live in the foresty part? You don't want to live on this sunny grassland that's got no cover, right? So the east side of Chicago, very early on, develops more residential, and west develops more farming. But this is all pretty early on. It's important to understand the next section I'm going to kind of talk about. I'm really going to be talking about subsistence farmers, people who are living off the land. Again, this is 1830. You do not have Marshall Fields. You cannot go buy yourself a shirt. You have to, grow wool and then, spin it and make thread and then make a shirt or buy a stack of flour and use that for a dress or some shit. This is Little House on the Prairie, motherfuckers. This is not easy living. Who read Little House on the Prairie? Okay, if you haven't, you probably should. Laura Ingalls Wilder is lit, you guys. All right. Okay, so some foundational groups. The earliest immigrants, and I also want to mention this because inevitably I know I'm going to get a question of how is the South Side different? Which is a great question, and you should ask that at the end of every single lecture we give, except this one, because I'm going to address it now. There was not the level of segregation that we see in the city today present at this point in time, and I'm talking 1830, when we have all these early farmers, because farmers don't give a shit. Everything is prairie and swamp and woods, so why not settle in those woods instead of these woods? It doesn't matter. Why not settle in Beverly on top of a giant geological formation that used to be an island instead of settling on the north side? No one cares. So these farmers and these early immigrant groups settled literally anywhere. There wasn't racism to it. The only place they didn't settle so much was the southwest side, and that's because you might be familiar with the Chicago Portage. It was an actual wooded swamp, mud, disgusting. Nobody wants to live in wooded swamp, muddy, disgusting. So that's kind of the one exception. Then we built a canal through it. Anyway, we'll get to that. So you have four major immigrant groups that are the early European farmers in Chicago. You have the English. The English, in the 1700s, England is having a little bit of an issue with inheritance laws. So basically in England around this time, if you are the youngest sibling, you're just screwed. There is no land for you. All of the land goes to the oldest sibling. So you have grown up in an agrarian. The more drinks I have, the worse I'm going to get at saying agrarian.
Give her more.
Agricultural. You grew up in this agricultural landscape. You know all about farming, and you are getting dick all to farm when your parents kick it. So where do you go? I don't know, maybe America, where there's all the land for the taking and you can make all the farms you want. Some English also immigrate to Illinois from the eastern part of America, because at this time we didn't really understand the whole you can exhaust soil thing. So, you grow soybeans there too long and you fuck up all the nutrients in the soil and now you can't grow anything there. So a lot of English on the East Coast were we don't really know how to fix the land, so we'll just move west. So that was a real thing that happened too. Then you have the Irish. Any guess why Irish farmers would have immigrated to America between 1845 and 1852? I do appreciate the person that said alcohol. But I'm not Irish, and so I don't think I can laugh at that joke.
It's all right, we can.
Yeah. Small thing rhymes with potato famine. Potato famine. Obviously, you knew how to grow crops, but you are having a small famine at home, so you moved to America. And a lot of Irish immigrants would move to America and then farm for somebody else for a few years until they could save up money to build their own farm. And then you have the Germans. represent. I come from a long line of Germans. Germans arrive a little bit later. We get here in the late 1800s, also due to inheritance laws, but it's the opposite of the English. So the English move here because if you're the youngest sibling, you get fucked out of land, right? The German move here because they split every parcel of land by the number of kids that you have, and everybody gets an equal share. This is like 1830, guys. Like, people are having like 20 kids, right? And like 12 of them survive to adulthood. So it's unsustainable divisions in inheritance law that force a lot of German farmers to move here. Also overpopulation, bad weather. There's a lot of industrial opportunities here. Yeah. And lastly, and this one's the most fascinating and also very impactful for Northsiders, Luxembourgers. You may have heard of the very tiny country of Luxembourg. There were only 175,000 people that lived in Luxembourg in 1839, and they started immigrating en masse to America around 1842. And it's because they actually couldn't sustain the agricultural agrarian lifestyle that they'd grown up with, because Luxembourg is very tiny and it was growing in population, and so you literally couldn't fit farms in Luxembourg anymore. So they moved to America. Okay, foundational groups. Now I'm going to give you guys a couple of specific examples, because I find in history, you can talk about the English did this, the Germans did this, but it's not very interesting unless you can make it specific. And you can tell the specific story of an English farmer or a Swiss farmer in this case. So we're going to talk about my home dog, Conrad Sulzer. If you have a printed packet or you're looking at the slides online, please appreciate my early 2000s word art, Conrad Sulzer. He was an ugly motherfucker. Super ugly. And Mary Fuck Kill of Chicago people, Conrad Sulzer's definitely, he's in the kill. Okay.
His son was the first burial at Graceland from a certain point of view.
Ooh, also maybe the first person buried at Graceland, says an expert. Okay. So Conrad Sulzer, he is Swiss. I didn't talk about them, but whatever. He is the pioneer settler of Ravenswood. He arrives in Chicago in 1836, and he purchases 100 acres around Chicago and Montrose in 1837. Does anybody know what library is near Chicago and Montrose? Or near, excuse me. Yeah, Sulzer Library, not Chicago and Montrose, sorry. Sulzer, yeah, there we go. Lincoln and Montrose. You might be familiar with Sulzer Regional Library. That is named for Conrad Sulzer, and they have a hideous picture of him in the lobby. The picture isn't hideous, he's hideous. Anyway, 1837, he purchases a wooded strip of oaks, elms, and maples along an ancient post-glacial beach, quote, a sinuous line of high ground, today known as Clark Street. And I found, again, in David Standish's article, a great description of what Conrad Sulzer would have seen from his property, which is, again, high ground with lots of trees, in 1837. Looking east, he would have seen land falling in sand dune waves and scrub to the lakeshore. A succession of ponds defined a long, swampy slough that ran parallel to the lake through the dunes, extending from Fullerton all the way to Evanston. It was known as the 10-mile ditch before it was filled in and forgotten. Now let's see what he would see from the other side. That's looking east. Swampy, wet, right? Swampy, sandy, wet. That's what he sees to the east. The eastern edge of a large island of prairie, extending south from what is now Peterson to North Avenue, roughly the shape of Italy, surrounded by woods. So this is what you can kind of imagine. He's on this little wooded strip. To the west, he sees prairie. To the east, he sees sandy swamp. And he goes on to turn that wilderness into a livestock farm and a horticultural garden. He engages in early public service, and in the late 1840s, many other farmers joined Conrad Sulzer in the area. I also want to talk about Jim Mooney. Jim Mooney was Irish. I did talk about the Irish. 1844, so this is right towards the beginning of the potato famine. Mooney arrives here at the suggestion of a fellow Irishman he was friends with. He claimed land, upon his friend's suggestion, he claimed land that was 2/3 timber and 1/3 wet. He was told to do this by his friend because when the water was frozen and you couldn't get fish in the river, you would still be able to live off the land by hunting in the woods. So his friend was like, make sure you buy a piece of land that's 2/3 timber. He would plant seeds in the soft, fresh earth in the summer or in the spring. And when the summer sun baked the ground hard, he would bring countless pails of water from the slough to nourish his crops. Eventually, farmers like Mooney would remove vegetation and dig irrigation ditches to maximize the growing potential of their land. And having cleared and drained the land, English, German, and Irish truck farmers would go on to raise oats, corn, barley, wheat, onions, and potatoes. Others specialized. Some did horseradish. That's not just a thing that comes in a jar. That's a plant. I learned that too, don't worry. Horseradish, celery, pickles, sauerkraut, or flowers. We're going to talk about all those things. Cattle and hogs would graze freely in the woods, fattening up on acorns. So that gives you a sense of what it was like to be Conrad Sulzer in the 1830s or Jim Mooney in the 1840s. And what was farm life like? Everybody worked on the farm. Children would grow up with little tasks, often working in the gardens, the vegetable gardens, because again, you're subsistence farming. And then both spouses would participate in labor on the farm. Often the tasks were gender segregated, but a lot of times, look guys, it's 1840. Your husband is probably gonna die. Maybe you're gonna die. I don't know. One of you is gonna die. But if you're a woman and your husband dies, holy shit, now you own a farm. And you can actually make money for yourself and live a much more independent life than the average aristocrat. So pretty dope to be a farm woman. Also a lot of work, to be fair, but whatever. So let's talk about their work. Mechanization begins in the early 19th century, although it's important to note horsepower alone is used all the way up until the 1920s. As farms begin to mechanize, you see this shit.
Agrarian.
Hopefully this is not agrarian. Hopefully this is... Are you guys getting bored? Sorry. All right. Mechanization. So as mechanization comes about, farms transition from being subsistence farming, where you're just feeding yourself, to like, oh, hey, maybe I could sell my extra cucumbers and make a quick buck. Much of this innovation begins with Cyrus McCormick. Cyrus McCormick was a blacksmith in Virginia. He developed the first mechanical reaper to harvest grain in 1831 when he was only 22 years old. What did you do at 22? Yeah, Cyrus McCormick was out here making local curiosities. You can see a picture of Cyrus McCormick and his reaper. The funniest thing I read about Cyrus McCormick is that when he first created this reaper, it was considered a local curiosity. It was like, what is that weird 22-year-old doing with this like weird thing in his grain?
The internet, can you blame him?
Right. So he was on to something. In 1847, Cyrus McCormick's reaper had achieved a lot of popularity, and he decides to base his business in Chicago. Now, the reason he bases his business in Chicago is that he sees agricultural futures lay to the west, and that Chicago has a railroad, a canal, a telegraph link to the east, and it proved to be the best location for him to start his business. By 1850...
Not his native Virginia. Didn't really need farm labor saving equipment in his native Virginia.
By 1850, which is only 19 years later, the McCormick factory is in full operation, employing almost 650 people. Now, let's imagine you pick a produce that you grow. I don't care. Pick one. You'll find out which ones later, but pick a produce. Imagine that you're growing all this produce and you need to get it to people to sell. Because you're in the middle of fucking nowhere. So, like, how are you going to find people to buy your grain? Originally, farmers would just load up their wagon full of grain or cucumbers or whatever and drive into town and then be like, hey, want some cucumbers? Cucumbers over here. Obviously, this is a shitty system to sell stuff. As industrialization occurs and transportation improves, eventually you stop bringing, if you're a commercial farmer in Western Illinois, you don't bring your stuff into the city anymore. You bring your produce to the nearest barge stop or the nearest rail stop. And this is very convenient. It is way better than trying to go into the city to sell your stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. As commercial farming becomes larger pieces of land further west, urban farms, which are fairly small, become specialized, and they grow more produce and things that you might need to actually feed the people that live in the city. We'll talk more about this. And they start being known as truck farms. So truck farms. Truck farms, this is the most consistent way that people are getting goods to the city around this point in time. Originally, you have oxen pulled carts on crude roads. This is the 1830s, and eventually people start being like, hey, Chicago's really wet for like many parts of the year. And you actually can't get your goods to the city because there's too much mud. So these people start putting down plank roads. And I have some images in the packet of plank roads. Plank roads were where you just put down wood boards over the mud and then charged people for the right to drive their carts over them. The first Whiskeyport Road, predecessor to Ogden Avenue. Ogden Avenue, you might recognize, as a diagonal street. So is Milwaukee, which was also a plank road. People talk a lot about like, oh, the indigenous trails are the reason that we have like diagonal streets. No, it's because it was the point of high ground and nobody likes wet feet. Indigenous people included. But many of those pieces of high ground, Clark Street, Ogden, Milwaukee, also become plank roads. I'm going to read to you a little bit about Ogden, or Whiskeyport Road as it was known. People using this avenue could reach the city in about 1 day's time coming from Naperville. Businesses were established near toll gates to allow travelers easy access to food, drink, and rest during their trips. After several years, the road proved to be a failure. The boards often became slippery while wet, impassable in the winter months, and thieves often stole pieces of the road to use for local construction projects.
Chicago way? That happens in New Orleans.
Lock up your construction goods. Okay. Milwaukee fares a little bit better. Milwaukee, again, low sandy ridge, higher than the surrounding swampland. The Milwaukee Plank Road, then known as the Northwest Plank Road, leads out and actually connects to a different road. So using this road system, you could get as far out as Elgin and Geneva into the city by 1852. It's a very popular path, and it was prone to becoming impassable. And I quote, "What was a 4-day trip in good weather was an 8-day trip in the mud, and in the spring it was impossible." Elgin to Chicago, 8 days. And they're probably exaggerating in this quote, but horse-drawn wagons at this time can travel about 10 to 30 miles a day. So that gives you a sense of how far truck farmers are operating. Okay, so I'm gonna skip through some stuff. Okay, let's talk about the Western farms. Let's talk about these farms. We're gonna come back to truck farmers. We're gonna come back to urban farms. I want to talk a little bit about grain culture. By 1860, Illinois is the #1 producer of both grain and wheat. And so you no longer have to go into the city if you're a commercial farmer out to the west. You go to your local barge stop on the canal, or you go to your local rail stop. And what happens there is I have some pictures of this process because it's pretty cool. In here somewhere. It's one of the pictures. Great, cool. It's the one that says 1848, grading grain at the Board of Trade. So you bring your grain to your nearest grain elevator. Somebody there looks at your grain and decides how good it is. Is it A grade grain? Is it B grade grain? Just like grades in school, A is the best, B is not so good, D is probably like, I don't know, you shat on your wheat or whatever. So when you would get there, somebody would determine what grade your grain was. They would pay you the going rate for, let's say, I don't know how you measure grain, 100 pounds of grade B grain. And they give you the flat rate for that. And then you go on your merry way back to your farm. And at that grain elevator, and I have a lot of pictures of grain elevators in here because grain elevators are mind-boggling. But anyway, So you give it to the grain elevator, they put all of your grain up, and they commingle it with everybody else's grade B grain. And so then the train or the barge comes along and they say, hey, we want 2,000 pounds of grade B grain. And using gravity, all that grain just goes shloop into your, that's the official noise, into the train or into the barge and goes on its merry way. And this has simplified the process dramatically for farmers, and it's made it much easier for purchasers as well. And this sort of organization is how we end up with the Board of Trade. The Board of Trade institutionalized in 1848. It starts as a voluntary association of grain merchants to standardize grain payments based on assessed quality, just like I said. It simplified the process of selling grain and is soon applied to many other things like pigs, cows, and agriculture. It provided a lot of great things for farmers and a lot of great things for purchasers. And people started betting on how much grade B grain would be selling for in August, which is what grain futures are. You are saying, I'm going to bet $10 on how much the grain is going to cost in August. Guys, I'm not a finance person. That's my best way of simplifying it. If you're a stockbroker, please feel free to talk later. Okay, by canal. By canal. Perhaps you decide, fuck trains, because you think canals are awesome, and you live right by the canal. Early in the 1600s, 1700s, Joliet, Marquette, LaSalle, they come to Chicago and they're like, holy shit, there's just one piece of muddy swamp separating the Chicago River and the Mississippi River system. Let's build a canal. In 1830, canal commissioners come to Chicago and plat out the city of Chicago for sale in the hopes of selling enough land in this shitty frontier town to raise enough money to build a canal. Chicago would not exist without the I&M Canal. They're successful. In 1836, they raise enough money and they begin construction of the I&M Canal, a 96-mile project requiring the construction of 15 locks, 5 aqueducts, and 4 hydraulic power basins, all cut through rock-hard dolomite. It takes 12 years. It is back-raking, low-wage work done almost entirely by Irish immigrants. There is no dynamite at this time. You are doing this shit by hand. You are a seasonal laborer. You are paid $1 per 16-hour day. Wow. That is $28 in today's money. And you're not even paid in money. You're paid in proprietary canal script. That is accepted by the inflated grocery stores closest to the canal, and that's it. Your life sucks. So what's funny is a lot of these Irish canal diggers, it's not funny, it's so sad. The Irish canal diggers begin squatting on the land next to the canal because there's this thing where the federal government, once they're done building the canal, all the excess land they sell to whoever had first dibs on it. But if you're an Irish immigrant, the government hates you and they say, hey, fuck you, we're going to sell it to these English and Germans because we like them better. And you don't even though you've been squatting on that land for 12 years, the U.S. government says, fuck you, and McKinley Park gets settled by Germans. Sad story. So maybe you decide to do rail. 1848, the Galena and Chicago Union opens as the first railroad in Chicago. I will read a quote from the Scientific American from 1909. The canal failed to fulfill the high hopes with which it had been constructed, and indeed it was not finally completed until the year 1848. But a new method of transportation was at hand, which was destined to do for Chicago and the surrounding county all and far more than had ever been promised by the Canal Railroad. Because guess what? You don't have to dig through rock-hard dolomite limestone. Railroads. You can just put together a couple steel mills, and then pretty soon you can make the train go wherever the hell you want. You don't have to follow waterways or existing paths. You don't have to build aqueducts and locks and lifts. Railroad in every way, shape, and form is, and I hate to say this as a canal enthusiast, better. It does require more gasoline or diesel. Is diesel gasoline? Mixed answers from the crowd. Cool. By 1860, Illinois ranks second in the nation in terms of rail mileage. Farmers loved this. You could just build so many railroads, and then every farm was close to a railroad stop. I have a picture of a railroad map. around this time. Railroads were everywhere. We loved railroads. So what had been a difficult journey of 3 to 4 days to transport a wagon full of grain from the Fox River is 35 miles west of Chicago, was now a simple several-hour trip by train into the heart of the city. Now, this is an important shift in agricultural history because all of a sudden, you are no longer producing food on your farm just to feed your family, and you are not necessarily running a farm with the goal of profit. All of a sudden, a new form of urban farming emerges, and that is feeding the people that moved to Chicago. Because as Chicago gets larger, there becomes this need to feed the people that live in the city itself. And this is 1860. This isn't a time where we have nice refrigerated trucks and you can buy tomatoes at any point in the year. Produce goes bad. Produce spoils. You need those produce farms fairly close to the city so that it doesn't spoil by the time people want to buy it. So it's this really interesting relationship between industrialization and farms because the bigger the city gets, the more urban farms you need. But urban farms are threatened by settlement because it's farmland and you want to build a bunch of condos there. So where are farms at this time? Following the Great Chicago Fire in 1871.
October 8th, approximately 9 p.m.
October 8th, 1871, approximately 9 p.m. Vegetable and dairy farms are forced outside of the city limits. Now, before you guys are thinking, oh, the city limits, all those vegetable and dairy farms went out by O'Hare. No, I'm talking early city limits. We're talking all those farms moved north of North Avenue and west of Western. You can see an annexation map on the pamphlet if you're curious. And after the Great Chicago Fire, they also put in this rule where the only farm animals permitted to stable within city limits are horses. And that's because you need horses to get around. So you can't even have cattle farms downtown anymore after 1871. Farming grows very popular in outlying townships like Lakeview because you can build with wood. There's no restrictions on that. You can have a big farm, and maybe you can even start a community for your group of Swedish or whatever it is. I mean, it's, pick your flavor of immigrant. They all did the same thing. Dairy farms, you're seeing a lot in DuPage, Cook, and Lake counties, closer areas of Will and McHenry, creameries and milk processing facilities being located closer to the train. Hay and oats, again, big cash crops for a lot of farmers, all going to be further west. That hay was really important because the Union stockyards were here, and I don't know if you realize this, but cows eat hay. So you had to have a ton of hay fairly close to the city to even feed the animals that were being stored here for slaughter. Pretty nuts. And in exchange, those stockyards would give all of their excess manure to the farmers. Only after 1900, because before 1900, they just put all that shit in the river. I'm not even kidding. All right, I see some people falling asleep, so I'm going to speed through this. It's okay, guys. I'm self-aware. Closer to the city, again, that's where you're going to get more of those urban truck farmers. A lot more produce, a lot more farms, smaller farms, focused on feeding the people that lived in the city itself. And this farming would continue for many, many years, well into the 1940s and 50s, sometimes in land plots smushed between roads, commuter rail lines, and encroaching development. Now, where exactly in the city are you selling your cucumbers or selling your celery or whatever it is? You are going to the produce market. I have some fun images of the produce market in here as well. The produce market originally was in the downtown loop. That's where everybody was. This is where you expected to find fresh produce, and this is where you would go. As part of reformers' ideas to transform the old city, especially after 1871, when we have a fresh start and we have the ability to kind of control where things happen, we moved that produce market out of downtown to South Water Street. That's today's Wacker Drive, South Wacker Drive, backing right up to the river. So imagine where basically the Sears Tower is today. You have the old South Water Street market. You would have all types of people, from wholesalers to people selling specialty goods right out of their truck that they brought in there that morning. And in 1925, the produce market moves basically to UIC, where it still is today. The buildings are still there anyway. At this point, it's very far from the loop, but by 1925, things have changed. And by 1925, you just need rail access for your produce markets. Does anybody know where the produce markets in Chicago are today?
Along the river, international produce.
Along the river, along the rail, in Little Village, in the industrial district. It's also where I work. If you're wondering where your local brickyards are, they are also in that area. But Little Village, right along the I-55, just north of the I-55, you're talking California Western, that's where all of our produce markets are. Still are there today, still close to the train, still close to the rail. I mean, there's not a canal there. Well, there is a canal there, but there's not the I&M canal anymore, and now there's the Stevenson Expressway. So all of the produce markets today in Chicago are located along the canal, the rail, and the highway, still to this day. I'm going to tell you a couple stories about truck farms because I think this is really fascinating. The first one I'll talk about is the Hortick Farm in Schaumburg. In the early 1900s, it was one of 2 truck farms in the immediate area. The others in the area were primarily dairy farms, growing mostly grain for their cattle. A variety of vegetables were grown: cabbage, tomatoes, onions, squash, carrots, parsnips, sugar beets, asparagus, melons, pumpkins, corn, cucumbers, rhubarb, and raspberries. There's also a cherry orchard and an apple orchard, as well as a huge bed of gladiola flowers. Most of this produce from the Hortick farm was taken to the Randolph Street Market. So that's kind of where you imagine like Fulton Market is today. That was a little bit more meat focused, but they still had veggies. Where it was purchased by wholesalers and retailers. And I'll read you some quotes from the granddaughter of the proprietor of the Hortick farm. Truck farming is hard work and long hours. You drive to the market at 2 a.m. and then work until the next day's load was ready for delivery. From planting in spring until harvesting in fall, there was always plowing, planting, cultivating, and harvesting to do. In winter, there were always machines to repair. Grandpa Hortick told a story that he had to get up early in the morning to take his produce down to the South Water Market. He'd load it up on horse and buggy, sell it there, and come back home. He said he was so tired by the time he was back in Rogers Park that he would fall asleep, but the horse knew its way home. So cute. Dude, my car doesn't know how to get home when I'm tired. Fuck it, I'm getting a horse. Horses are cheaper than Teslas. Okay. There's also the Menke Farm in Niles. The Menke, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Menke. There's a Menke Garden Center. It's the same thing. It was built on the side of the farm. 1870s dates that farm. Back when I was a boy, says the 91-year-old third-generation farmer, we grew beets, carrots, onions, and tomatoes and took them down to the South Water Market. Later, we started a farm stand on the property in 1929 to sell direct. You also have Dutch. The Dutch communities on the south side settling in Roseland. Roseland, basically Pullman today. By 1900, that community had grown to 240 Dutch Catholic families who opened truck farms, growing everything from asparagus and lettuce to fall squashes and pumpkins for both local and export markets. Soon enough, many of these farms specialized in raising onion sets, which were small onions used to plant bigger onions. Author Edna Ferber set her 1924 novel So Big in Roseland, where she describes turn-of-the-century Halsted Street as full of agricultural color. Mile after mile of cabbage fields, jade green against the earth. Mile after mile of red cabbage, a rich plummy burgundy veined with black. Love it. By the early 20th century, the Pullman Palace Car Company and other urban development ate up much of the Roseland area. No more Dutch farmers. Thank you, Pullman. Well, yeah, they'd move to South Holland and move everywhere else because ultimately, as the city industrializes, your farm land becomes so fucking valuable that you're like, fuck it, I'll move further west. And because now you have this great transportation network, it doesn't matter. You can still get your produce into the city in a reasonable amount of time. We're going to keep talking about that. Now, here's the one issue in Chicago. Let's imagine you're a farmer. What do you think is the biggest issue you face?
Cold.
Winter. Yeah. Correct. So Chicago, we have this beautiful soil, we have this wonderful sun, we have this great climate and temperature for growing produce, but we also have winter. You might have noticed. Mm-hmm. So what we do is start building greenhouses. There are many photos of greenhouses in mostly the north side, pictures of those in our pamphlets today. So greenhouses became a very effective way to supply lettuce, tomatoes, peas, and other veggies in the off-season. It was popular in Europe already at this point. And again, many of our immigrants at this time are coming from Europe, so they have that know-how of how greenhouses work. You would heat them with coal. I'm like, how did not all of these people die of carbon monoxide poisoning? And Chicago had a shitload of coal, so it was pretty inexpensive as well. Illinois ranked first in the country in area covered by glass houses. A large percentage of these were in neighborhoods of Chicago, with several firms having over 1 million square feet of land under glass. Luxembourgers again. Luxembourgers were so good at greenhouses. They were really good at greenhouses. Perhaps 100 greenhouse clusters stretched from Rogers Park northwest through Westridge, Niles Center, and Des Plaines, most in Luxembourg hands by 1919, when their Growers Association numbered some 1,200 families. Again, coming from a country of 179,000 people. But yeah, Luxembourger is really good at greenhouses. Almost the entire north side, from basically Foster and Lincoln all the way north, all Luxembourgers in their greenhouses. So as I get to the latter half of my lecture here, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these specific crops that we grew and how eventually those crops disappeared, but they came back on the Chicago hot dog. So stay awake, it only gets better. The number one thing that Chicago grew, by and large, and I actually learned this by studying enough neighborhoods and seeing the commonalities enough times. The story of every Chicago neighborhood starts with celery. Celery is the best thing that, it just loves Chicago. Celery is the perfect thing to grow in Chicago. It loves black, boggy, and sandy soil. And as Chicago horticulturist Edgar Sanders said from the 19th century, there is no land which can compete with such as this for celery culture. We were very good at growing celery. And celery had this added benefit. Remember that winter thing we talked about? Celery could actually be harvested as late as January, as long as it was a fairly mild winter and you had packed it well in sand or soil. Chicago quickly became the celery capital of the United States. Now, this is important because celery wasn't just celery. Like, how many of you, raise your hand, actually love celery? You guys are lying. Okay, raise your hand if there is celery currently in your fridge right now. Yeah, there's like, okay. All right.
That isn't rotting.
That isn't rotting. Okay. Raise your hand if once a week you do not purchase celery only for it to slowly become squishy in your fridge.
Does Dr. Brown's celery soda count?
No. Celery is a genetically modified food. All food today is genetically modified. It's fine, guys. That's how we have food. Anyway, celery, when celery was first kind of discovered by Europeans, it was a wild plant. The seed is actually the first thing we started using in cooking. And it was very fussy to grow and very difficult to obtain. So if you are part of the Victorian upper classes, what do you love more than something that is fussy, difficult to grow, and very expensive? If you were Queen Victoria, you were like, yes, I shall have celery gardens because I must, because celery gardens are difficult and expensive. And this kicks out this massive fad. Celery becomes huge, kind of like acai berries or kale or pumpkin spice, like whatever it is, like celery becomes a fad food. People would have specific vases in their homes designed just to hold celery. People thought it had miraculous health properties. Food historian Bruce Craig theorizes people thought it was miraculous because it was so fibrous and you had to chew it for so long. People would order plates of celery in restaurants. People would consume celery pills and miracle tonics. I have a picture of Payne Celery Compound, which was advertised widely as a cure for upset stomach, liver issues, nerve pain, rheumatism, and kidney troubles.
Did it work?
I would like to point out that this is before the passage of the 1906 FDA. So celery, at its coolest point in history, it is being grown in Chicago. We are the celery capital of the United States. We are almost the celery capital of the world. We grow celery better than anyone else at a time when everybody wants celery. Nowadays, we're like, okay, I guess it's on this crudité plate. But back then, people were like, fuck yeah, celery. Okay. The other thing that we grow really well are pickles. And I know you don't grow a pickle, you grow a cucumber. But Chicago in the late 1880s is home to no fewer than 3 nationally famous pickle brands. Squire Dingy, we don't really know them today. Budlong, who you probably know more for the chicken chain named after them. And Clausen pickles. Clausen dill pickles are still an Illinois tradition. Part of the reason that pickles grew really well here, we had a lot of Europeans very interested in pickling things here in the late 1800s. You might recognize Germans and Polish as people who love to pickle the fuck out of everything, as well as Norwegians. And pickling was a great way to preserve produce, so pickling was very popular along with salting because you didn't have to worry about how far away your farm was. You could just pickle it. In 1903, the Chicago Tribune reported there were 12,000 bushels of onions and cucumbers picked and sacked per day during the busy season on Northside farms that stretched from Bowmanville around Foster and Western all the way up to Evanston. Lyman Budlong, I got a picture of him and his very lovely wife here in the brochure. Lyman Budlong and his wife, I could only find described as Mrs. Lyman Budlong. Established the 700-acre Budlong Pickle Farm at Foster and Lincoln in 1859. The farm grew many types of vegetables, but, they predominantly grew cucumbers, most of it going to city tables, with some shipped to distant points in the U.S. and Canada. The Clausen Pickle Company, on the other hand, was founded in 1870 on the site of, get this, the man that started Clausen Pickles, his name was Klaus Clausen. I love that. Klaus Clausen. I can't, no, I'm not saying it multiple times. Klaus Clausen. Agrarian. He had a farm at 51st and Western. He had a surplus crop of cucumbers one year, so he decided to pickle them. Clausen pickles were actually still grown and bottled at 51st and Western until 1976. Today they are in Woodstock, Illinois. Woodstock, Illinois, you may recognize, has a very important role to play in today's festivities, Groundhog Day. Yes. I'm a groundhog baby, so I am very interested in groundhog culture. I would like to share a fun fact with you. The groundhog is accurate less than 40% of the time. And also, the groundhog lives in a nice warm cage most of the year, and he lives a cushy-ass life with regular meals, and then once a year they take this poor groundhog and they stick him in a cold-ass hole in the ground, and they're like, tell the future. I feel so bad for him. Anyway.
For woodchucks.
That's the other thing. The groundhog is it's not even Puxatawny anymore. It's the 5th groundhog they've called Puxatawny. So he doesn't remember the burrow. Okay. I digress. Woodstock, Illinois. Now you know Woodstock, Illinois to be famous not just for groundhogs, but also for pickles. Clausen pickles. Still the best pickles, in my opinion. Cabbage. We grew a shitload of cabbage. Cabbage also, you might guess, grows in swampy soil that likes the cold. I shall read you a quote. Alderman Thomas P. Keene, who grew up on Goose Island during the 1890s, remembered, "Every house had a garden and chickens, sometimes a goat. It was a little community where everybody knew everybody else. In the fall, we all laid in wagon loads of potatoes and cabbages, and the knife which we cut up the cabbages for sauerkraut was passed from family to family." Why is cabbage popular here? Not just that it grows well here. It likes cool weather. It's a cool weather vegetable. It likes sandy, wet soil. but also Northern Europeans were very familiar with cabbage and sauerkraut. Again, we were like one of the most German cities in the world, and like also one of the most Polish cities in the world. So yeah, sauerkraut, pickled cabbage, we were really into it. Many areas around Chicago actually gained cabbage-related monikers. Bridgeport, McKinley Park, Roseland, Old Town, and Lincoln Park, as far as I could find, all had parts of them nicknamed the Cabbage Patch at one point. Rural Westridge is perhaps the most famous cabbage growers, as they got into a little spat with their next-door neighbors, Roger Park. Rogers Park, you might recognize, is on the east side, right? And remember how we talked about how the prairie fires burn out, and east of the river is the wooded lands, the wooded highlands, you got views of the lake. So obviously, residentially, you're going to settle to the east. And if you have a little bit of money, you're going to settle to the east. And if you don't have a lot of money and you're a poor Irish person and you would like to start yourself a cabbage farm, you live west, right? So when Rogers Park and Westridge got into a little tiff about where they should build their parks, Rogers Parkers, these snobby fucks, referred to Westridgers as cabbage heads derogatorily, and there was a big to-do about this. If you come on one of our Westridge or Rogers Park tours, you will hear all about the cabbage wars, and our tour guide Anthony usually brings a cabbage with him. So, spoiler alert. But Westridge wasn't the only like cabbage-loving part of town. This one surprised me. I actually didn't know this one until I knew about the cabbage, I knew about the celery, I knew about the pickles. I did not know about this one until I started researching for this lecture. Chicago for a long time was the nation's floral capital. There's several examples from here. Dr. John A. Kennicott, he settled in what is now Glenview in 1837. He settled there because Chicago was a railroad hub, and that was the main means of getting flowers to other localities. Flowers, again, will die if you don't transfer them quickly. So, again, being close to transportation networks was part of the draw to start your farm in Chicago. There was also a very inexpensive source of coal, and most of the floral produce of Chicago was grown in greenhouses. So, again, you needed to be dying of asphyxiation inside your greenhouse. Floral growing is very labor intensive, and you had a lot of immigrant labor you could exploit here in the late 1800s. The Chicago Floral and Garden Show, today, you might know the Flower and Garden Show. It takes place at Navy Pier every year. Guys, I'm not in my 20s anymore, and I won't chuck.
Your mom could do it.
Carol would do it. She would. The Chicago Flower and Garden Show dates all the way back to 1847. Isn't that wild? Okay. Joseph Budlong, not Lyman Budlong, his brother, Joseph Budlong, started Bowmanville greenhouses to grow vegetables, just like his brother. But when their profitability declined, he transitioned to flowers exclusively by 1880. And his nurseries were primarily around Foster and Lincoln. The Budlong Nursery at one point hosted 30,000 grafted rose plants in its dozens of glass houses. But the most interesting one to me, I actually have a little image of it. I have an image of this specific greenhouse. George Whitbald. George Whitbald was born into a floral family in Germany. His father was a florist. George himself worked for 5 years in the German king's garden. He was a royal trained florist. And he moved to Chicago in 1862. He worked for other people for about 5 years and then started his own business at North and Clark. He cultivated not only flowers but ferns as well. And what's interesting to me, I haven't been able to prove this link, but I'm sure it exists. He was one of the premier fern growers in the area. So Garfield Park Conservatory, you might be familiar with their fern room. I strongly believe that some of the ferns or all of the ferns from that conservatory probably came from George Whitbald. And you actually can see his ferns in that picture. It's pretty cool. Or his palms? Maybe those are palms. I'm actually not really a plant person. Okay. I've gotten very good at growing spicy peppers and nothing else. Okay. Lastly, Luxemburgers. Luxemburgers are everywhere, you guys. The Rose Incarnation King, Peter Reinberg. I have a photo of him here too. His family began growing turnips and potatoes in Edgewater in 1848, and he switched the family business to roses and flowers in 1890. This is interesting to think about because 1890 is a huge year of development in Chicago. We're gearing up for the World's Fair. And to think that this was somebody growing like food to eat, and then he's like, yeah, no, the money's in flowers. And people aren't starving, so like, let's sell flowers. He eventually owned over 1 million square feet of greenhouses. He was the most famous florist in Chicago. His business made him a millionaire. He was one of the largest rose growers in the world, as well as the largest grower of carnations in the United States. Additionally, he was considered father of the forest preserves, acquiring himself 18,000 acres of forest during his tenure as the Cook County Board of Commissioners president, 1914 to 1921, single-handedly, in many ways, starting the forest preserves with this generous donation of land. Give it up to the Rose Incarnation King, Peter Reinberg. Now, the last specific crop I want to call out, I actually have a personal connection to, and that is asparagus. So I have read in stories of asparagus growing in Chicago. We actually have a very good climate for asparagus, and there's actually wild asparagus varietals that grow in Illinois. They don't look so much like normal asparagus, but keep your eyes out this spring because it is a native, I don't know if it's native, but it does grow wild in Illinois, asparagus. But there was such massive cultivation of asparagus here that Del Monte actually started a asparagus farm and canning operation in Rochelle, Illinois. During the 1940s, women went to work in that asparagus canning factory and in the fields, and my grandmother was one of them. The cool thing is, I found that the Library of Congress has this archive of photos of that Rochelle asparagus canning plant in 1944. I included one image here. It's not my grandmother, but I do need to visit my grandmother and be like, do you recognize any of these people? My grandmother has told me stories of this asparagus canning plant many years. She was an orphan by the time she graduated high school. Her father was struck by lightning and died. No, not struck by lightning, electrocuted and died on his farm. And this happened when she was about 6, 8, something like that. And then her mother basically needed a hysterectomy, but she couldn't get one because times was tough in the 40s, and bled out and died. So my grandmother went to live with the next door neighbors, but her older sister and her younger sister, basically all orphans in the 1940s. Also, my grandmother just like talks about this so casually. She's like, that's the barn where my father died. Man, I didn't live through World War II, and it's so obvious. Anyway, but she and her sisters obviously needed to make extra income for her family, so she and her sister, her older sister, both worked in the canning plant, gathering the asparagus and shoving it into cans. Her younger sister, who I think is 8 years younger than my grandma, wasn't allowed to work in the factory because she wasn't old enough, so she was actually out in the fields harvesting asparagus. Because if you were a child, you were allowed to harvest the asparagus, but not can it. So, really crazy. The Del Monte asparagus canning plant no longer exists in Rochelle, but was a major source of employment, and again, documented by the Library of Congress as an example of women in wartime factories. It's pretty rad to think my grandmother was part of that. My grandma's lived a wild life. I could give a whole lecture about it. She then joined the U.S. Nursing Corps. Anyway. Still to this day, Illinois is a top 10 grower of asparagus, cauliflower, herbs, green peas, lima beans, mustard greens, and snap peas. We also are the ideal climate for summer squash, spinach, carrots, tomatoes, and beans. And today, Illinois ranks higher than every other state in number of pumpkins. We're officially the Halloween state.
Take that, Halloween sound.
We also, get this, we are also number 1 in horseradish. Now, I falsely promoted this lecture by saying I was going to talk about livestock, but I had so much other things to talk about that I am going to acknowledge I meant to talk about livestock, but I ruled it out because we didn't grow livestock here, we murdered them. Just to give you a fact so you don't go home feeling disappointed, Union stockyards consolidated in 1864. The Union stockyards were actually organized by the train people because they were tired of people just wandering through the streets with their cows trying to sell them. And there were all these small stockyards all over the place. So the Union stockyards were a very convenient place to bring all the cows to kill them. 475 acres. By the 1920s, at its peak, it employs 40,000 people and processes 19 million animals a year, putting nearly all of their carcasses into Bubbly Creek. Let's see, okay. Yeah, I got a picture of the stockyards here if you want to see what it looks like. Along with this badass 40s woman canning asparagus, love it. Okay. So as I wind down our lecture here, I'm going to talk about the hot dogs, I swear to God. I had to make you guys pay attention because I might talk about it another time. Changing times. What happened to all these farms? I have bored you to tears with where the farms were and what life was like on those farms and the difference between urban farms and commercial farms, urban farms and rural farms, all the different things that people grew, all the greenhouses, all of this. Where did they go? I think the best way to summarize it is to quote Monica Eng in a very excellent WBEZ Curious City article. It talks all about big crops here. The city's emergence as an agricultural center occurred at this very same time the city was industrializing and, in fact, for some of the very same reasons. So we built a city on the backs of agriculture. We are a city because of farmers. We put ourselves on the map because of farm-related innovations like the McCormick Reaper. We built rail networks not for any other reason except to move farm goods around better. We then needed factories like steel rolling mills to build all the stuff to build the railroads, right? And we needed factories to build reapers, and we needed factories to print the Sears catalog to ship to all those farmers so that they could buy seeds. And all of those factories were built on farmland. And all that innovation and all those jobs, all the jobs at the factories and all the jobs in the farms were so attractive that people moved to Chicago because they knew they could get work. And then they needed somewhere to live. And where are you going to live except on a development that used to be a farm? And then we needed farms to feed all the people that lived here. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? What came first, Chicago or the farms? It's hard to say. Okay, so the farms came first. But it is really interesting because farms sort of engineered their own destruction. The reason you don't have a farm next to your house in Edgewater today is because that land became so sought after that that farmer was like, oh, I'm going to make how much money? Okay, yeah, I'll move to Schaumburg. And then Schaumburg became too industrialized, right? So the very thing that attracted farmers here, which was those transportation networks and all those people who wanted to buy your produce, is the very thing that drew those farmers, pushed those farmers out. So if we as Chicagoans don't acknowledge this incredible role that farmers played in our history, but also the incredible role that farmers play in getting food to our tables today, we are being big city assholes. So I want to talk a little bit about land values with one of my favorite people in Chicago history, William Harding. I have a little picture of him. Actually, I have a picture of his son. But William Harding immigrates from England in the early 1830s. The family story goes that he was almost cannibalized en route because his ship crashed in a horrible storm and they ended up on a raft and they were floating adrift. And they got to a point where everyone was so hungry that they drew straws to see who was going to get eaten. And William Harding drew the short straw. But fortunately, they spotted land. This is the family tall tale. I don't know how accurate it is. When William Harding gets to the United States successfully on his raft after almost being eaten, he immediately heads west to Chicago. No surprise. He just landed in New York with a bunch of people that want to eat him. And I love this quote. When he moved to Chicago, he, quote, found the town marshy and moved northwest to settle. William Harding is the farmer that created the neighborhood I live in today, Albany Park. In 1836, he bought 640 acres. He paid $8 to $10 an acre. Some accounts say 8, some say 10. So basically he paid 640 times 10. I'm not doing math. Agrarian. Okay, 6,400? Yeah.
You're welcome.
He paid $6,400 for 640 acres of land. Bounded by Lawrence, Pulaski, the river, and Kedzie Avenue. Those are the same boundaries that Albany Park functionally has today. He establishes a brickyard, so he wasn't a farmer technically. He was a subsistence farmer. His commercial operation was a brickyard because you pull clay from the river, you make bricks. We have the Chicago Common. Ask me about bricks later. I know a lot about bricks. Okay. He has a child, Cornelia Harding, who ends up marrying Richard Spikings. And in 1848, William Harding Spikings is born. That is the mustachioed hottie that you see in your pamphlet here. William Harding Spikings is born in 1848 in a log cabin at Avers in Argyle that was acquired by his grandfather from an Indian chief. So says the story. He held onto his property until 1912 when he sold half an acre at the corner of Lawrence and Pulaski for $2,000. This was 2,000 times the price per acre that his grandfather had paid just 76 years before. 14 years after that, it sold for $160,000. He lived until 92 years old, just like his grandfather and just like his father. And he, in his lifetime, again, watched his family farmland increase in value from $10 an acre to $160,000 for half an acre. People witnessed this transition, and that is what is crazy, because William Harding lived in the proximity. He was born in a cabin in the proximity of the Kimball Station I showed you a picture of at the beginning of this presentation. He saw Kimball Station be built in 1909, and he lived long enough to watch that station slowly become part of an urban landscape. It is wild. He sold his land in 1893. Ultimately, the rest of the Harding property ended up being purchased by a group of investors in 1893, among them Delancey Louderback, who dubbed the neighborhood Albany Park after his homeland of Albany, New York, and Park as a suffix because that's what every other neighborhood did. There is no Albany Park in Albany Park. It is not Wicker Park. It is not Humboldt Park. It is Albany plus the park-like atmosphere of the community. And that's fascinating to me. Again, people witness this transition. Greenhouses also fell by the wayside. The price to heat them in the wintertime was becoming cost prohibitive. There's this excellent little snippet I have a picture of in the pamphlet of Albert Fuke. At the end of the 20th century, Albert Fuke changes his business. He had been a floral grower. He had been growing flowers to real estate. And in 1927, he advertises his property at Halstead, Grace, and Sheridan. In 1927, he advertises it. He says, I'm going out of business. Come buy the flowers because I'm turning into a real estate developer. So don't feel bad for the farmers because the farmers made out like motherfucking bandits. They bought land that wasn't theirs for dirt cheap prices, and they sold it a lifetime later for astronomical prices. So don't feel bad for the farmers, but it is fascinating to see the way that they left. The other thing that really affected things was refrigerated trucks. All of a sudden, you could get tomatoes from Kansas just as quick as you could get tomatoes from Illinois. So all of a sudden, perishability has less of an impact on where we need to grow our food. Budlong Farm becomes a golf course and later becomes the neighborhood Budlong Woods. Developers begin buying up orchards, cherry orchards in Andersonville and truck farms in Edgewater, cutting down the dense woods of the Lakeview Township in the 1880s to make way for future development. From 1870 to 1887, the population of the township grew from 2,000 citizens to 45,000 people. That is in 17 years. 2,000 to 45,000. Lakeview Township is annexed in 1889, and it has electric trolleys by 1892. Now let's talk about the hot dog. It's the last thing I'm going to talk about. How am I doing on time? How bad am I? Woo! Okay. Whew, shit. Sorry. Okay, the hot dog. I'm going to speed through it. Agrarian. Hot dog earrings. Okay. In the Great Depression, 1930s, hot dog vendors did very well because it was a very filling meal that you could purchase for very cheap from anywhere. And it was an excellent filling meal for penny pinching families. To make the meal a little bit more filling for these hungry families, all these hot dog vendors, who in many instances were right next door to the produce vendor and the meat vendor and everything else, they started piling vegetables on top of the hot dog to make it more nutritious for people in the Great Depression. Celery salt. Yeah. Your password for tonight. Celery salt is a vestige of the celery fad. It is a vestige of Chicago being the celery capital of the world. Have you ever seen celery salt outside of Chicago? Celery salt is such a specific derivative of celery that it could only exist in a place that was capitalizing on derivatives of celery. Pickle spears and pickle relish, I shouldn't even have to explain this to you. Pickles, obviously beloved by all the immigrants that were eating this Chicago dog, but it's also a remnant of Chicago's day as pickle heyday. As for the fluorescent green tint of the relish, it is most likely that a pickle manufacturer tried to make up for uneven hues in his product by adding green food coloring and went a little too far. Tomatoes were a staple crop of Chicago truck farmers like the Horticks of Schaumburg. Onions were a staple crop of Chicago's truck farmers. Remember those Dutch farmers in Roseland growing those starter onions? Yellow mustard. We are still one of the top 10 producers in the country of mustard greens. And with a huge German population, we obviously had an appetite for the shit. Plockmans is the Chicago native-born mustard brand. Its specific, mild, brilliantly turmeric-hued mustard was invented in the United States in 1904. Before then, mustard only came in 3 varieties: hot, spicy, or sweet. Moritz Plockmann immigrated to the United States from Germany. Surprise, surprise. Sport peppers is the biggest mystery of the list. Sport peppers hail from Mississippi. They were grown as a backup crop to the Tabasco pepper, because Tabasco peppers were finicky and the sport pepper was reliable. My guess, this is my guess, my educated guess, is that sport peppers are a remnant of the beginnings of the Great Migration, because you have a lot of Mississippi farmers, primarily Black Americans, immigrating here to Chicago starting in the 19-teens, lasting all the way through the 60s, 40s, whatever you want to call it. You have the Great Migration of Black people from the South to Chicago. 1930 lines up, and who else would know about sport peppers? Sport peppers are still super hard to find outside of Chicago, and they are a very specific crop grown in Mississippi. An all-beef hot dog. Stockyards, baby! Guess what? We didn't trust the stockyards. We thought they were putting garbage and mice and Irish immigrants into our food, and they were right. So here's the thing. This is actually a nod to Chicago's Jewish population, because people believed Jewish foods were pure, or at least more pure than the crap that we were turning out from the stockyards. Jewish immigrants Samuel Ladani and Emil Heikel, I don't speak German, of Austria-Hungary would go on to create Chicago's favorite hot dog brand in 1893, Vienna beef. So we trusted the kosher dog because it seemed less gross than ours. And lastly, the poppy seed bun. Polish immigrant Sam Rosen opens his bakery in 1909 and helps organize the first bakers' union of Chicago. His business became a huge success as both the go-to rye bread source for German and Polish, but he also was an innovator who created the poppy seed bun that we all know and love today. The Chicago hot dog is the most perfect example of all of the agriculture and all of the agricultural purposes that we grew, from grain to beef to pickles and celery salt. The Chicago hot dog is emblematic of our agricultural history, and it's so fucking exciting that we have this lasting vestige beyond our street names, beyond our neighborhood names. The best homage that we can give to all those Illinois downstate farmers who feel like they want to start a new state is that, hey, our hot dog wouldn't exist without you. The last thing that I want to say is that Chicago's municipal code today offers no specific limit on either the number or kind of animals that Chicagoans can keep. So if you are interested in procuring a goat or a cow or a chicken, or maybe you have 6 chickens in your backyard, like some people here today, you are allowed to grow whatever fucking livestock you want in Chicago. You are allowed to grow whatever plants you want. We have no HOAs that'll tell you not to grow corn. And if anybody ever tries to give you shit about growing corn or chickens, you tell them this is an agricultural city, baby, and I can grow whatever the fuck I want. Thanks to all of the alcohol you guys have bought me. I have gone wildly over on time, and I will take a few questions.
It's your birthday.
Yes.
So I have a two-parter.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The first part is, why are we not known as the big celery instead of the big stinky fucking onion?
Yeah.
And the second part is, considering how John Kellogg was such a health nut, why didn't he shove celery up his ass instead of yogurt?
I will address the first part of the question in a second. I feel you know the answer to the second half of the question. Why is Chicago not known as big celery? Why are we known for the smelly onion? And it all comes down to who got there first. The onion grew wild, and the onion was stinky, and the onion became the name Chicagoa, or whatever you want to pronounce it, whatever YouTube tells you. So the stinky onion is native, and celery was cultivated. That is why we are big onion, not big celery.
All right.
Other questions? Yes?
Is the giant pickle picture from the slides an actual giant pickle that existed?
The giant pickle picture from the slides, I think, is a representation of the amount of pickles we grew, not so much a representation of one specific pickle. Any other questions? I tried to anticipate them. Yes, Stephanie?
Did the native people who once lived here today farm anything in this area?
Yeah, so did indigenous people in this area farm? They did. Again, so people don't settle in swamps unless they're dumb Europeans. Because people don't like malaria or whatever. Whatever the Illinois equivalent of swamp disease is. Indigenous people use Chicago different parts of Chicago for different reasons. Because again, you have these 3 biomes. You have the grasslands, which indigenous people would burn and then cultivate agriculture on. You had the swamp, which indigenous people were like, why would I fuck around in a swamp? And then there's mosquitoes over there. And then you have the wooded lands, right? So wooded was where you didn't really cut down trees as an indigenous person because you could just burn the prairie. So in terms of where you would farm as an indigenous person, you would farm on the prairie lands or you would farm in the floodplains. And indigenous people here, as far as I know, were what they call hunter-farmers. So you would hunt in the grasslands and you would hunt in the river. And then you would cultivate on parts of the prairie and in the floodplains, and mostly they were growing corn and squash. Any other questions? You're all trying to go home. You're like, you've talked to me about farms for so long. Yes?
Are you ready for a shot?
No, I am not ready for a shot. I'm not trying to die. And I still have a literally full French 75. I would like to encourage all of you to donate to our nonprofit organization, and because your donations fund all kinds of things, and running nonprofits is thankless work. So please give not just our organization, but every small nonprofit you know your money. Because As much as you love to give how easy it is to give $100 through your corporate giving program to the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association has so much money. And if you give $100 to your local organization that supports sex workers, or your local organization that supports walking tours, or whatever it is, probably support the sex workers. When you give money to a nonprofit that lists a maximum of 2 people on their About Me page, your $100 goes farther. So be thoughtful with your charitable giving, and the American Heart Association is very important, but I encourage you to donate not just to nonprofits, but to small nonprofits, because they need it the most. Thank you very much. Please donate to my nonprofit. I am also a board member at Sputnik Press, a nonprofit affordable print shop in Chicago, so check them out and donate to them too. Lastly, I would also like to say please donate to your bartenders. Give it up for Emmy and Oscar in the back. Because I work hard, but bartenders work harder. Thank you. Last questions? No, I've kept you too long. Ask me after class. Thank you. Come back next week. Next week we are talking, next week we have Mandy here to talk about the history of prostitution. It's going to be really fucking fun and probably a little depressing, but Mandy's really good at throwing in some chuckles. Because we wanted to celebrate Valentine's Day in the way that only Chicago for Chicagoans could, we are doing a lecture on the history of prostitution, and then the week after that, Adam Seltzer will be here to talk about the history of vice districts. Celebrate Valentine's Day with us. Thank you, guys.
Yay.